Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our very first Humanli webinar. I'm delighted that you all came along to have a listen. My name is Carol Daly, for people who don't know me, and I'm the founder and director of Humanli. I'm not going to spend too much time introducing what we do in Humanli, but basically we're in the social impact space, connecting companies and charities and community projects to create real social impact. We will show a little video later on in the presentation, which explains exactly what we do. So I'll stop at that point. So I want to firstly, I suppose, welcome our panel. It's been a crazy 18, nearly heading for 24 months at this stage with COVID and everything that's happened. If somebody said it to you back in October 2019, that we were going to be separated from everybody, living in our own homes, wearing masks out on the street, not able to attend public events, you'd have been taken away and certified, basically. But it happened, and it happened to everybody on the planet. So what we want to concentrate on this morning is the effect that COVID has had on organizations, how they reacted initially and how they're dealing with it into the future, and what has changed, and how can company culture be maintained as we learn to live with COVID. So I just want to introduce you to our fantastic panel this morning of experts. Our first person is Sinéad Egan, who is a people and change consultant with KPMG. So Sinéad, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming along. Our next guest is Catherine Duffy, who is well known in the region. Catherine is the General Manager of Northern Trust, a large organisation in the region down here. And our third panelist, last but not least, is Conor Brophy, who is the Managing Director of Strategic Communications at Teneo. So folks, you're all very welcome, and thanks for giving us the time this morning to spend on this. I'm going to come to Sinéad first, if that's okay. And Sinéad, really, can we just start off with what happened within KPMG when COVID hit back in March 2020?
Well, it feels like years ago at this stage, even though it was only 18 months ago, but I don't think any of us were quite prepared for a pandemic. So there was a lot of uncertainty to navigate. And I think the most important thing when we started reacting was to keep everyone safe. So the staff's health and well-being was the top priority, getting as many people transitioned into working from home as possible and making sure that there was safety measures in place for those who had to remain in the office. And after that, for us, it was trying to seamlessly deliver our work and engagements, because so many of our clients, they had their own COVID challenges and they were looking to us for support. And from that point of view, we were lucky because we had already got everybody equipped with laptops. It was a bit of an easier transition because we're used to having a distributed workforce on client site, but we did have to get our heads around Zoom and Teams and upskill ourselves with some of that technology. But for us, maintaining that support to clients and maintaining that trust with clients was the second priority. And then it was about supporting each other and building our resilience. And in that sense, I think transparent communication and being flexible, because everybody's personal circumstances were so different. So I think that brought out a lot of kindness and compassion from our colleagues, which really helped us to navigate that initial phase.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. Yeah, exactly. Big shock initially. So Catherine, can I ask you along the same lines, in Northern Trust, what happened? You wake up one morning, you're the General Manager of Northern Trust, people can't come to work anymore.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Good afternoon, everyone. And thanks for inviting me here today. I'm delighted to be part of Humanli today. So something very similar to what Sinéad said, 1,400 staff, we were in the office on a Wednesday. On the Thursday, we all had to go home. I was really proud, though, the way that everyone reacted and everyone got on with things. And unlike Sinéad, we had to deliver out laptops, so we weren't all immobilized directly immediately from home. So as you can imagine, the following 2 weeks, there was a lot of coming and froing to the office, people collecting chairs, laptops, things they had in their desks, etc., all that they needed. But everyone did it with a good composure. And we also, you know, staff were at the top of our mind. We wanted to make sure people got home, people at home felt safe, and that they had the equipment to do the job that they could do. We were totally flexible with people as well, I'd say, in the first good while, you know, where people were, some people logging on early, some people late. People had, you know, issues with creches and schools and all that. So we wanted to make sure people settled themselves into home first, which was very important for us. I think another big thing that happened to us as well, we had a lot of people due to join us the following Monday after we all left on the previous Thursday. So our onboarding plans had to jump into action very, very quick. And that was really important for us. And I think we've done a great job on that now. And we've a lot there that we have learned. And I think we're going to carry a lot of those over even when we are back in the office in relation to onboarding. Like Sinead said, we had to get ourselves IT all know about what everything was going on WebEx, on Teams, and IM as well. Communication was something I think that we did very well from the beginning. So we had internal communication. We wanted to make sure we kept in touch with our teams. Our managers kept in touch with their teams. Somebody kept in touch with the managers of the managers, etc. And also our client base. You know, it was very important to have BAU as soon as we could. And that was really important to us, Carl. So I was really, really very proud of the way everyone came into action, and it really worked out well the way we are now. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Yeah, great story, great story. Can I stay along the same lines then, just bring Conor in and talk about Teneo and the initial reactions in Teneo and what you guys had to deal with?
Sure, and thanks again, Carl. Look, I'll be echoing probably a lot of what Sinead and Catherine have just said there. In our own business, you know, very much like Sinead and Catherine, your first concern is for your people. How are we keeping them safe? Your second concern then is how are we going to continue service to clients and meet their needs? You know, just by way of brief context, so our two main businesses would be strategy and comms, which is the side of the house that I sit in, then our management consulting business. So kind of challenges that we're dealing with and we're helping clients through are everything from, you know, internal and external communications, organizational design, transformation. So all the stuff that immediately became very, very relevant for everybody very, very quickly, right? So, you know, I think we were conscious of trying to be our own best case study if we could. You know, if we can't get communications right, then, you know, how can we credibly advise clients in these kind of circumstances? So that was a big priority for us. I think the other thing that probably really helped, and I imagine this is probably echoed by Sinead and Catherine to a certain degree too, would be, you know, we were fortunate enough, say, to have colleagues in Hong Kong who were able to give us a little bit of advance warning, and colleagues in our office in Shanghai, you know, who were very much able to say, this is real, this is coming your way, these are the things you need to be prepared for, this is what we've been doing. And you look, let's face it, we go back to, you know, all of the different phases of COVID. I guess that sort of March 2019 bit, you know, I think of, you know, without kind of downplaying it, is almost the kind of the novelty banana bread baking phase at the early part of it. You remember when people were, you know, rallying around and looking to do the best they could in difficult circumstances. And you know, I think one thing that we found is that you had to be incredibly flexible, right? So what was working on day one and week one and in week two actually wasn't going to be appropriate when, you know, you started to deal with the realization that this wasn't going to be over in 3 months. You know, I can think of some of our early meetings and people were trying to get a handle on, well, how long are we going to be doing this for? And, you know, your more optimistic projections of, I'm sure it'll be done by summer, through to people who were at that stage seen as being very pessimistic, saying, well, I'm not so sure we'll be out of the woods here by September. You know, you were nearly looking at them at the Cassandras as the Cassandras at that point. And it turns out that they were the hopeless optimists as well, that, you know, we could never have predicted just how long we'd be in and out of lockdown for and how long it was going to go for. So plans getting torn up very quickly. And I think that, you know, pushing all of us off our axis, and that we're so used to, not only from our own business perspective, but from the perspective of clients, being, you know, very strategic about things and trying to take a medium to long-term outlook, and suddenly finding that actually that wasn't always appropriate, that you needed to be able to roll with the punches and roll with the day-to-day. And that lack of visibility, I think, when everybody, you know, gets into the Teams or Zoom world, and you're only seeing that really top 2% of your colleagues' lives and your clients' lives and their working lives, and being very conscious of the whole world of issues that's going on around that, I think fundamentally, that was the big priority for me, is recognizing that people who have underlying health conditions might be feeling especially vulnerable, people who are looking after their relatives, people who, you know, unfortunately, as the pandemic progressed, were dealing with bereavement and dealing with illness, and, you know, having to cope with those things. What you really saw, I think, was, to Sinead's point, how resilient people are, also how kind our colleagues and our clients were, and you know, really how that comes to the fore, and how really in the first couple of weeks in particular, the first thing that everybody was asking was not, oh, what's this going to mean for me? It's, how can I help? How can we help? How can we help the ongoing efforts, you know, at company level, at client level, and also at national level? What can we do to help the HSE? What can we do to help the government? What can we do to help frontline healthcare workers as they cope with this? That was really, really brilliant to see across our business and across a lot of other organizations as well.
Thanks, Conor. That's fantastic. Yeah. Before we move on to the next questions, can I just say, if you are out there and you've access to Twitter, we'd love you to just share our hashtag, which is culture after COVID, and the Humanli website is just at Humanli on Twitter. So that's just the social media piece. So, okay, folks, that was fantastic. So that's how you all reacted initially. And so we moved along, and as Conor just said there, COVID didn't end overnight. It dragged and we're still in it. So from the perspective of the initial reaction, what has changed now from a leadership perspective for people in organizations and bringing people into the organization from a cultural point of view? What have we learned? What kind of things will remain? So where do we go from here, having experienced what we experienced? Can I bring Sinead in again just on that point?
Yeah, of course. Well, I think we've now realised that this is a really unique opportunity, maybe a once in a generation opportunity to rethink the human experience at work. And really our leaders are tasked with making the most of this, because it would be such a pity to lose some of the positives that we've experienced and we've gained. And if we don't take on board the learnings, it's such a lost opportunity. So I think really now is a chance for us to create a new working model and a new type of employee experience. And whether that's going to be in a hybrid working environment, which is what we're going to do in KPMG, or a virtual first working environment, which is what some other organizations are leading with, we need to figure out what that looks like. And we're starting without a roadmap. So we're only experimenting at this stage and trying to figure out what will work and what will make a really empowering, inclusive and connected workforce. And that's what we're aiming for. So I think thinking of leaders and how they should bring everybody in, they need to start with listening to employees. So that's going to help them diagnose where they are now. So understanding what's working well, what the challenges are, what we've gained, and maybe what we could disrupt, things that weren't working for us and that we might be able to change. And they really need to use their purpose and values to guide them. So we go back to our values all the time and think about, is this really how we want to work and what we want to do in our working lives? And then being very intentional. So when you have that diagnosis and you know what you want to create in your culture going forward, focusing on your key priorities and investing in them, and then going back and asking employees again, what's working? How is your experience? I think that's really key for leaders now.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It is a whole new perspective. Like, we've been catapulted probably 10 years ahead of where we should have been with this whole thing. So again, Catherine, can I just bring you in on that point in Northern Trust? So from a leadership perspective, what has changed for you? What has been good? What has been bad? And what direction are you guys going to take?
So, you know, we've learned an awful lot, as Sinead said there, and we're still learning, I have to say. And I think, you know, what's really, really important is to, as Sinead said, listen, but to listen to everyone in the company, not just to the managers and the officers. You really have to start at those who started with your onboarding before, those who started with your onboarding while the pandemic was going on. So it is really about listening and to hear what people have to say, because now we have the opportunity to change or to enhance or to move the dial. And that's what we need to do now. We want to keep the people we have working with us. We want to make sure that they're happy and that they're safe. So a lot of comms has happened. A lot of surveys have happened as well, where we've got to hear things, you know, that we might have just taken for granted, some of the things, you know, that have happened to people, or that we mightn't have known about, things that happened to people. So it was good to hear it from all of the staff. We also have a number of critical functions that we had to keep people in the office working with us through the pandemic on some, so from day one. And we made sure, you know, there were people who volunteered to come back into the office. So we had that point of view. We had to make sure the office was safe, and we had all the COVID guidelines in place, et cetera, et cetera. And this would be for things like, you know, packages coming in, signatures, checks, things exactly like that. So it was good to have that core bunch of people in who are still in with us, and that they were able to spread the message out as well to the other people in relation to the office, you know, to say it's a safe place. So it's part of our comms. I'm just going back to that again, Carl, that it is part of your comms, that you have internal comms, you have your external comms, and you make sure you know that they're right, but that we are listening to staff in relation to, you know, what would you like to see? What did work? What didn't work? And what can we bin, but what can we continue on, you know, as we go through the journey? And when we're all back in the office, and hopefully it won't be too far away, you know, what can we adopt that we did learn? What can we make sure that we don't do that again? If this was to come on again, God forbid, if there was anything like this again, you know, what exactly have we learned? We are still learning. We're all going to make mistakes as we go ahead, but I think it's really important for us to look at those mistakes and learn from them. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, as you said, it's not all bad. There's been some good stuff out of this, and I suppose there's been more engagement as well. I mean, whether it's forced upon you or isn't forced upon you, there has been more engagement. So, Conor, just on that front, I mean, I know that you guys, you teach the CEOs, or you part of your business is talking to CEOs and companies. So, what's changed, and how will you lead them or get them to lead going forward from a Teneo point of view?
It's a good question, Carl, and I think, look, remembering fundamentally communication is a two-way process. That yes, we do advise CEOs and senior leaders. We also learn from them, right? Because that helps us to get better at our own business. So it becomes a virtuous circle. And if I had two things I'd say up front, it would be, first, challenge all your assumptions, right? People talk about the Great Reset. I think that's quite an apt phrase, because even at a practical level, I think one of the things that we realize, and a lot of the companies and senior leaders that we deal with would have realized, is that maybe some of the values that we had are not our values, but the value that we placed on certain things about office culture were slightly skewed. And some of the things that we thought were benefits of being in the office, say, actually weren't all of that positive and didn't contribute as much as we thought that they did to culture and to positive culture development. And some of the things that maybe we overlooked or thought were relatively minor actually turned out to be a lot more significant and do an awful lot more for culture and do an awful lot more for our people and for the power of our organization than perhaps we realize. And I think even at a very simple level, what I mean by that is things like, you took for granted being able to poke your head around the door or poke your head around a colleague's desk and check something with them, ramble out with them for a cup of coffee in the middle of the day, when you kind of had a bit of a chat about maybe non-work stuff and blew off a little bit of steam, and having the option to do that. Bumping into people in the office who aren't directly involved in a particular project with you, or who you don't necessarily work with day to day on, or from a slightly different function in the business, and learning from them and seeing what's going on in their world. The random stuff like just sitting in an office and how much you absorb about what's going on in the organization around you, just from the conversations you're overhearing, and how beneficial that is, particularly for staff at an earlier stage of their career, for juniors or for people who've just recently joined the business, how much of a learning opportunity they unfortunately were losing out on. I feel kind of particularly strongly about the experience of our younger team members and people who recently joined us, or people who were at an earlier stage in their career, because I think it's probably hurt them to a much greater degree than it's hurt people at a more advanced stage who probably are to the point in their careers where they're self-started and have benefited from the learning environment that they've grown up through in this organization and in other organizations, and all of that little stuff as I outlined at the start that surrounded them in the office, and how beneficial that was. And yet on the flip side then, the stuff that maybe we over-indexed on, how important being in the office is for productivity, well, that pretty much fell away overnight when we had the great enforced experiment, and you realized not only are people equally as productive, in fact in some cases they're much more productive. And you look at things like the commute and what that was doing to people's daily lives. And if we could take one thing out of all of this, it would be, can we kill the morning and evening commute? Can we spread people's travel time in ways that is actually productive, and make sure that they're only traveling to and from the office and traveling to and from meetings when it actually genuinely makes sense, so that it's not sucking people's will to live, never mind their opportunity to be productive in the work that they're carrying out for their clients and for the organization. And my second point there would be to be humble enough to admit that you don't know, that actually we can embrace a certain degree of uncertainty, and we can view how we come out of this as something of an experiment too. That's an uncomfortable place to be, right? It's uncomfortable for all of us, but what I've seen is people can be hidebound to the idea of, well, my plan from here is, how quickly can we get back to 5 days in the office, everybody back in the building, and how soon is that going to happen, and what's the roadmap to get there? To the other end of the spectrum then, everything is now different, and everybody should be working from home, and everything should happen remotely from now till the end of time. I'm not sure either of those extremes, frankly, are the right way to go. And I think, a lot of what, just as we saw on the way into this, everybody's personal situation is different. Some people need more support than others. Some people need more flexibility than others. Some people repay that flexibility 100-fold. Other people actually maybe need to be in the office a little bit more and benefit a little bit more from that environment. And a lot of it is going to have to be assessed on a case-by-case basis, which is very, very difficult. But there are huge opportunities as well as, challenges in that, because, as we now know, and I know we've seen in our own business, we have a couple of colleagues who've relocated outside of Dublin who, are living their best lives distantly from home base. and are doing fantastic work, and that makes sense for them, and it suits their balance of work, and therefore it suits us too. And it also opens our mind to the fact that actually when we're recruiting in future, we can recruit from a much broader pool. We're fishing in a much broader sea now in terms of the war for talent, if you like, that our opportunities there have increased greatly by being able to offer people a bit more flexibility. So, you know, I don't think I'd be keen on the idea of, yeah, here's our plan, it's going to be 3-2 split, or it's going to be 5 days in the office, or it's going to be no days in the office. It's going to be a 3-2 split until we have a better idea, or it's going to be 5 days in the office until we have a better idea. I think it's about having plan B and plan C, as we had to do during you know, the worst parts of this crisis. And let's hope that the worst parts are now well behind us. We'll also need a much greater degree of flexibility going forward. And I think, yeah, that can be a little bit, can push us out of our comfort zone. All the best learning comes when you're outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's really, really strange. So just, you touched on that, Conor, but I just go back to Sinead, but in relation to the offices themselves. So, you know, companies like KPMG, Sinead, have offices all over the world, you know, not just Ireland, all over the world, and similar to the other people on the panel here. So how do you see that working? Like, does that cause stress, anxiety within the organization as to how the space is going to work out? How are you going to manage space when people come back? Do you need offices in the future? And what kind of uncertainties does that create?
Yeah, so as Conor said, our whole idea of what an office is has been disrupted now. I think pre-COVID, if you had asked, what's an office for? Most of us would have said getting work done. But now we've actually realized getting work done can happen anywhere. And we really need to answer that question of what is our office for? And for every company, that might look a little bit different. For KPMG, we definitely think the office should be for training. And that's both the training that happens in a formal classroom setting, but also what Conor has talked about there, that learning by osmosis. So depending on your role, you might need to see your experienced colleagues in action and pick up little bits from the conversations they have, the way they handle meetings, and that might be easier to do in person. The second thing that we really look at is the belonging piece. So we have really been able to maintain teams and keep a connection throughout the last 18 months. But there's something about those informal social moments that happen at the water cooler when you're picking up a coffee, the little chat you have when you come in the morning, that hasn't been there throughout COVID fully. And that's something that we don't want to lose. So trying to reconnect people and bring them together as teams for at least that 1 or 2 days in the office is something that we think is a priority. And then finally, the collaboration and innovation. So this can happen in all settings, but something that we have done with our office in the IFSC is we've just opened Platform X, which is an innovation hub. And this is a section of our office that we have completely changed. We've taken out all the individual workstations. It's equipped with the best in class technologies, and it's meant for either in-person workshops, completely virtual workshops, or hybrid teams to workshop together. And this is a space that's dedicated to collaboration and equipping that through technology. And there's actually 32 of those innovation hubs in KPMG offices around the world. So we really see the office space as being critical to delivering that kind of innovation and collaboration that can happen through technology or in a room together.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I wouldn't have looked at it that way. So that's a really innovative way of looking at it. So again, on the same point, Catherine, what's happening in Northern Trust, or what's the outlook there from office space perspective?
Yeah, so we have, as you might know, we have 2 offices in Limerick and an office in Dublin. I think we're kind of fortunate in the offices that we have, that we wanted, before the pandemic, we had put in a lab into our Limerick office. We had made a lot of collaboration areas. We had staff who, you know, would say, I'm going to have this desk for 2 weeks and then I'm going to be at home for a week or whatever. So we kind of had a lot of that in play. Now we have to learn a lot more about it now. It has to be rolled out further now to everyone. So I think that that's really, really important for us. We found as well that there are certain people who want to be in the office and they need to be in the office. We found the grads that we took on didn't enjoy being at home as well, that they wanted to be back in the office. So we need to bring that into our planning, you know, as we go through early next year. We currently have we nearly have 600 back in the office, and we did it in various waves, all on a voluntary basis. And I'm just finding now, you know, that a lot more would like to come back now, but we have the capacities, you know, that we have to keep in line with the 2 meters, etc., and other precautions that we're taking. But there's definitely a cohort that are very, very keen to come back in. There's someone, we'll do hybrid as well, you know, that would work perfectly for them. And there's some who want to be in the office full time. So I think it is going to be a mixture of everything. I think we're still going to have to listen and learn from people. And I think what Conor said is right there. We may go hybrid, but we may need to tinker that as we go on. We may need, you know, to adapt parts of it, change parts of it, learn from other offices, etc. So I think the office will change definitely for the good. Our IT is fantastic, or that we have around Northern Trust. And people will have the option then, you know, because some people will not, for various reasons, not be able to come back to the office. They'll be able to still go on their WebEx or their Teams or whatever way they need to do the calls. We do find that, as I said, you know, some people are definitely missing the office, but are at the same time, they may not want to come back full time. But we also found, Carl, you know, that people are nervous about coming back to the office. And we have a program of work now that we're doing in relation to that, an induction before you come in, you know, kind of meeting somebody when you come in, having extra things on, like maybe, you know, free coffee or breakfasts or things like that, just to make people feel welcome when they come back to the office. And from the minute they come in through the door, we want them to feel safe. We have a little induction pack that everyone will get with various things in it to say welcome back, etc. We'll have banners up, you know, we'll do some very nice things. But definitely, I think that will help some people come back to the office. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, very interesting. So again, Conor, like you've I suppose you've 2 perspectives of it. You've got to learn yourselves internally in Teneo, and then maybe convey that or learn from the companies you're dealing with. So how is it looking from your point?
And certainly internally, our experience would have been very similar to what Catherine and Sinead were just outlining there. And I think that point that Catherine made about nervousness is very well made. That, you know, I can see that myself, that everybody has a slightly different level of risk tolerance, if you like, or residual nervousness about what the return to office is going to look like. And I think you really have to work at the level of who needs the most support and who needs to be the most comforted, and how can we make that happen so that everybody feels, you know, when they come back in, that firstly the timing is appropriate, and secondly the environment is going to be appropriate for them. And also, just to build on that point that Sinead made, you know, we've had to look at, well, what are we actually using the office for? So it's going to be used for collaborative meetings, where people either brainstorm or come up with ideas for clients and for work. It's going to be the learning and development side, which I think, you know, a point that Sinead made very strongly. I think that's really important. And if you're in the office, it's probably appropriate and it's important that you're going to have space where you can take a private call and take private video meetings. Because one thing that we've really discovered during lockdown is a lot of us now are doing a lot more work with our colleagues across the Teneo network, because suddenly it doesn't matter where you are. The work literally isn't where you are, it's what you do. So, you know, we're calling on colleagues from Brussels and New York and London, and they're calling on us to help clients on certain projects in a way that, you know, did happen to a certain degree before, but has happened to a much greater degree since, because there's no longer the same expectation or even the need to hop on a short haul or long haul flight to do this. Now, I'm sure that will come back to some degree, and I'll be very interested to see the pace at which it happens. But, you know, work is just happening. But what that means is that, you know, we need those private pods in the office that maybe we didn't have before, where people need to be able to take a call. And probably a lot of the, you know, the document drafting, the writing, I need to focus now and put my head down and just get through this presentation or put together this document, that's going to happen at home, or that's going to happen remotely. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And having the space conceived differently is, I think, probably the thing that we're struggling with at the moment, because as you can imagine, good office space is at a premium in Dublin, and we now realise that our 2 sites probably aren't ideally configured for the way that we want to work, and we think people are going to need to work for their own benefit and for the benefit of the business in future. So we're going to need to look at that. It's an interesting challenge, and I'm sure we're not alone in that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting challenge. And just to kind of on that point maybe a little bit more. So what would your experience be generally, say, from people? So you guys are working from the perspective of where you go from here, and Catherine touched on kind of, you know, asking questions and getting your staff, your teams involved more. So can I ask Sinead, like, what kind of stuff is coming back from employees as to, you know, in general, where they see it, and maybe just talk a little bit about, you know, what kind of reactions people are giving you as to where they see themselves in particular organizations into the future?
Yeah, so as Catherine said, for every individual, it is quite different. And that's a combination of how safe they feel, their personal circumstances, how they like to work. So I think this has given us all an opportunity to explore how we do our best work. And for some of us, that might be in the office, or it could be getting into a deep flow in a quiet space at home. So in terms of when we ask employees, how has this experience been from you, you get a real myriad of responses. And I think what we've said is that the flexibility is so important, because we need to try and accommodate and include everybody and empower everybody to do their best work. So that means that we do need to be really flexible. So if there's members of your team who would prefer to do, you know, their quiet work at home and arrange their week around that, that's something that we should try and accommodate. But I think a key concern as well for us is just thinking about the culture and some of those cues that we give in the office. So people have really missed, I think, the social events and being able to come together. And that would have been part of our culture strongly pre-COVID. And we haven't been able to bring groups of people together in those kind of social settings too much. So I think thinking about the cultural signals that we would have reinforced in the office, or the rituals we had as teams in the office, and not losing those, because we might never have all of the team together in the office at the same time again. So we really need to think about how we have those moments for celebrating success, connecting, and I think people are asking for that as well. So as well as the flexibility to work around their own lives and do their work in the best way, they do still want that bit of belonging and coming together. And that's something that we're really trying to understand, how best to do that on a regular basis, so that people who've been with us a long time continue to have good experiences with their colleagues. People who've only joined get to soak up the culture and make those connections and form their networks internally in the organization. And I think that's a real challenge going forward, because we relied on a lot of in-office cultural reinforcements that we're not going to be able to rely on going forward.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Sinead, and that's a topic that I have a huge interest in. I mean, I'm very much the old school. I love being in a room with people and interacting with people. I can't think, you know, of any way of replicating that. But you know, in this environment, we don't have a choice. As you said, there's certain things we just can't do and might not be able to do for a long, long time. So again, just to touch on that, Catherine, you know, you mentioned in relation to, say, new people coming on board, graduates coming into Northern Trust, and a lot of the excitement of joining a company is, you know, what's in store for me here? Okay, I know what the day job, you know, is going to be, but what other things are in store for me? Interaction with my colleagues at work, maybe events that are happening. With all the COVID restrictions, how are you going to deal with that, or what's your kind of answers in interviews, or have you been asked this type of thing in interviews of new people coming in?
Yeah, definitely we are, Carl, you know, and what we've seen from the people who are already here is people miss people, you know, and they miss, as we said, those water cooler moments. They miss learning from others. Some people joined us at the very beginning of the pandemic, some grads, you know, and it just didn't work out for them, because you learn from so many people when you're sitting beside them, or somebody's doing something, you say, hey, will you show me that, you know, and it's just too hard to do that when you're not around. So I think, you know, for us, what we've heard back is when I come back, what's the place going to look like? I don't have my creche facility sorted, my creche is closed. You know, there is a lot from a human side that we have to keep an eye on as well. So to give people a lot of notice, you know, to say, does this suit you? Let's work around this, because we still have a job to be done, but we've proven that we can do it outside of the office, which is great as well. So I think managers really have to get to know their teams, have to get to know what works. When we've clients coming in, we're going to need you in that day. You know, when we've board meetings in, we're going to need you in that day. Does that work for you? If not, will you join us on the VC? So I think there's an awful lot of options that we can explore with people. And as I said in one of the previous questions, we're not going to get it right from the beginning. We're definitely all on a learning curve, but we want to be on that learning curve together. That's why we do a lot of communications, a lot of surveys, so that we hear from everybody, not just from managers or, you know, officer level, that we hear from everyone across Northern Trust. One opportunity that I took, because when I tried to encourage people at the beginning of the pandemic, once we'd kind of settled in, maybe a month after or so, was when we saw all these meetings were taking place virtually on WebEx or Teams or IM, you know, and I was saying to people, try to broaden your network now. Try to, it's easier for people sometimes, other than if you're traveling, if you have to travel to whatever and 4 have to go with you and you see 2 over there, try to ask for 3 to join from the other side now. You know, try to broaden that network and see, can you get to know more people virtually now? And then that'll make it, when you go back, you know, we're back to traveling, etc., you'll have met, you know, even more people than maybe you would have if that journey had taken place. So we're trying to get people, you know, to see the positives now and then to see what we can bring into the office when they come back. But I do think, as Sinead and Conor said, it's really important for us to know our people, to know our staff, to keep in line with what others are doing as well, our peers, our people in the region, you know, what's happening in their workplaces, what's working from them and what's not working for them, but really to keep in touch with the staff. Thanks, Carol.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, that's fantastic. So what I'm hearing from you then is that there's, you know, if you put a positive spin on all of this, that there's a lot more interaction, that people in the management roles, they really have to focus on their people. They really have to get to know them, as you said, and find out what's going on. So it's really kind of digging down maybe a lot deeper than you would have in the past. So Conor, from your perspective, is that kind of the way it's panning out in Teneo, or what?
Yeah,
can you add to this?
Very much so. And look, I think we're in a kind of a slightly uneasy phase at the moment, I think. And I think one of the concerns I have, and certainly that we're seeing expressed from people as they start to move towards whatever the new normal looks like, is you see the kind of the clashing of, oh, some clients actually are okay with maybe meeting outdoors for a coffee now, and so that's okay for them. Other clients want to continue doing meetings virtually and doing calls virtually for now. And the 2 work cultures can actually create a little bit of stress on people, where you have the same kind of instant demand that you had when people were effectively expected to be at their laptop all day long and expected to be available for a Teams meeting at the drop of a hat and responding quickly to messages and responding quickly to emails, with now the return of the in-person meeting and the travel and the commute and the loss of time that you experience with that. So, you know, what we're trying to avoid is a situation where people have the worst of both, if you like, where they have all of these instant demands and you know, requirement or perceived requirement for instance, instant response, with a pattern of work that just doesn't facilitate that and that puts people under unnecessary pressure. And also, you know, to Sinead and to Catherine's point, you know, getting people to resharpen their networking skills and all of that side of things, and you know, for people who've recently joined the company who might not have actually met some of the clients that they've been servicing for the last 18 months face to face, you know, making sure they're getting out and about, making sure they're getting the learning opportunity and that they're getting the opportunity to impress and to progress in their career. One thing I've been really heartened by, though, is, you know, it's been very difficult to onboard people, you know, very difficult for those people, you know, at whatever level they're joining the firm at, and we're very conscious of that. But what's been really, you know, heartening for me is to see, you know, when we've had, as we've been able to do recently in line with the public health guidelines, you know, a small gathering of 6 people as a team, whether outdoors or at a restaurant, or, you know, we had a small barbecue at one point, and you see people who've never actually met each other before, and they're best friends, and it, you know, they've built up that relationship on Teams, and you think, God, you know, these are really good people. We know we really hired the right people here. You know, culture is people. At the end of the day, it doesn't get much more complicated than that. And when you see people who've adjusted in that way and very sociable, very much, you know, people who've managed to make those connections in a virtual environment, you know, they're going to be okay.
Yeah, that's brilliant stuff. And interesting that you mentioned that, and just share something with you. I did a personal development coaching course last year in 2020, and there was 25 of us on the course. We never met. Yet we interacted like we were all friends, like we knew each other. We did our peer-to-peer coaching afterwards, all on screens. And we finally met in August in Lahinch. We all came together and had a physical meeting, and it was incredible. It was actually like we knew each other. I didn't know how people were going to react to it. We all walked up into a hall, we met each other, we recognized each other, and we just straight away blended and continued that online relationship, but obviously on a physical basis. So it does work, and people are very resilient. I'm going to just, the last piece we want to cover just quickly is in relation to something that's dear to us in Humanli, and that would be the corporate social responsibility piece. So just wanted to ask each of the panelists individually, from a corporate social responsibility perspective and the things that you got involved in and did, and because there was restrictions with COVID that you couldn't do certain things, how has that changed now? And did the priority to do CSR activities fall during COVID? Has it got stronger since? Just what's your overall view on that, please? I'll start again with Sinead. Thanks.
Yeah, so we have a lot of focus on CSR in KPMG, and we get a certain amount of time per month that we can dedicate to any activity we want to get involved in. So I'll speak to two that I was involved in throughout the last 18 months. So an organisation we work with a lot is Alone, and I think we can all acknowledge that they played a pivotal role for many people throughout the pandemic, because so many of our older people were isolated, and it wasn't even just older people as well. It's anybody who was isolated, living alone during the pandemic, or unable to connect with their families and friends. It was a really difficult situation to be in, and we had a lot of volunteers that worked with Alone, and we were calling volunteers to help them and support them to make sure that they could deliver to the person who they were befriending during COVID, because they were dealing with their own set of challenges. So we were actually giving support to the volunteers and identifying maybe where those volunteers couldn't link in with the person they were befriending, and making sure that they still had somebody who was going to check in with them. And they also rolled out a lot of extra support. So for people who needed shopping picked up, or who needed something from the pharmacy and they didn't want to take the risk of going out, Alone actually were able to help out all of those people. So that felt like really meaningful and impactful work during those months of the pandemic when we were in lockdown. And I think that was definitely a firm priority. And although I would have a busy workload and scheduling and juggling a lot of different things, I always had time that I could take out to do that work, and that was a real priority. And something else that I was involved in is work with local schools. So we do a lot of work with schools, helping kids to just, do their reading. We do some kind of imagination programs. So we have something called the Doodle Den, and we had to switch all of that to online interactions. So I think it was a challenge for the teachers. It was a challenge for us to still get creative. I was frantically looking for markers and colouring pencils in my apartment, trying to gather up whatever I had. But it definitely did remain a priority. And I think sometimes when we're faced with a huge challenge like this, that all of us are experiencing, it actually widens our capacity for empathy for others. And during the pandemic, it took us a little bit out of ourselves and our own individual lives that we're so wrapped up in all of the time. So I think it did prompt us to think about others and how others were experiencing the pandemic. And it definitely was something that was very important to me, and in the firm as well. In KPMG, it was promoted a lot.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's great to hear, Sinead, because, but again, it's down to people and people driving it, because, initially I would have been afraid it was something that would just be let slip. You'd so many people like yourselves in big companies and so many priorities and so many things to look after, that maybe the corporate social responsibility piece that you would have done every year would be go down the pecking order, so to speak. But it's great to hear that it hasn't. So again, yeah. Catherine, can I just bring you in on that? So from your experiences in Northern Trust, how did things work out?
Well, definitely staff weren't going to let us put it down the pecking order, and they wanted to keep going with things, which was really important for us. So very like what Sinead said, junior achievement, we had it up online, teaching classes, SUIS with the reading with the children, we had that as well, that we were able to do it online. It took a bit of work, but we got there. We are back though now, I have to say, doing a lot. This is our Achieve Greater month in October, where with every event that we do, that there's meals given out to families in need. I also found throughout the pandemic, people were doing things in their communities, and then they involved Northern Trust, which was great. So the GAA, like dropping shopping, hospital visits, pharmacy visits, etc. An awful lot of our staff took advantage of that, and we're delighted with it. And I think we'll have new things that we'll be able to help people with. But as I said, it wasn't something that was going to be let drop, which is very important for Northern Trust as well, because it's part of our DNA and we want to be part of the community. So we were delighted to keep it going very much, Carla, I have to say. And I think we'll come back greater even on it now, you know, that we're able to do things. We're going down to a farm in Doon now towards the end of the month as well, helping with fruit picking, etc. down there. So there's great idea. We didn't have that idea at all before the pandemic. Also a big favorite one in the Limerick office is the Limerick Animal Welfare, you know, and we were only able to do so much for them, but we're ready to go back now and help them again with the staff. We also get 2 days annual leave where we can go and help and volunteer on the CSR side. They're always taken up incredibly well and throughout the year, which is great. So definitely it was something that kept going from a Northern Trust perspective and something that we will always keep going. Thank you. Super,
that's great. That's really, really good to hear. And Conor, anything to add from a Teneo's perspective?
Yeah, very much the same. I think one, again, heartening thing that I really took out of, you know, from the very start of this was that, you know, both ourselves internally and clients, the first thing that people wanted to do was see how they could help out. You know, one of the things that we saw in the very early stage was, you know, our public affairs team, our government relations team were nearly snowed under because every client was saying, how do I get in touch with government? How do I get in touch with this department? How do I offer what our company can switch on call center capacity to help take calls. You know, our company can provide PPE, we can source this, we can source that. You know, I'd say across the road here for me in Kildare Street, in Leinster House, I said they were nearly overwhelmed with calls coming in, which is great to be a part of. And internally, what that did was it renewed and enhanced people's own sense of purpose in what they're doing. Like, you know, we work with good people and we help make positive impact on the world around us. And it did actually then redouble people's commitment to our own CSR initiatives and to the charities and the non-profits that we support, like Shine a Light, Focus Ireland, Shine a Light would be a big one that we help out on every year. You know, obviously a lot of what we've been doing over the last 18 months is help transition those events from being very much physical to being virtual, but, you know, trying to preserve the experience for those involved in them at the same time. And things like Time to Read, you know, again, very similar to the kind of initiatives the KPMG and Northern Rock would be involved in, how we deliver those virtually and how we're going to go back to delivering them physically. And, you know, no shortage of volunteers, no shortage of people willing to get involved. And, you know, very much to Catherine's point, people wouldn't let us tone down any activity or wind it down in any way, shape or form. It was very much the opposite.
Okay, thanks, Conor, and thanks all the panelists. That was great. Yeah, no, look at that. As I said, that's the kind of business we're in Humanli. So it's great to hear that it's all positive. It's actually been enhanced, if anything. And there's a few questions coming in and that kind of thing. So look, I'm going to wrap up the formal part now. What I want to do is we're going to show the Humanli video. It's only 1 minute just to explain what we do rather than me waffling on. I think this gives you the message. And then I will come back to the few questions and answers. I'm just conscious of the time. We said we'd be gone within the hour, so we've about 10 minutes left max. So if we just show the video for 1 minute and I'll come back with some Q&A.
At Humanli, we have a mission. We help businesses create a lasting positive impact on communities in need across Ireland by working with them to develop a strategy for community investment. From there, we connect them with charities and groups from our Humanli family. These are people aiming to make a difference and do good for all kinds of communities in need. We reach out and establish their needs by hearing their story. And it's these stories that connect our business partners to the Humanli family. We then establish the goals of your business for real social impact and create more stories of support and engagement in the community. By listening to the voices of your business, we allow you to explore what matters and represents your brand. This leaves you with a clear and inclusive plan to help you direct resources for the greatest common benefit and partnerships that can flourish into the future. Together, we can do as much good as humanly possible.
Okay, so this is the message about Humanli and what we do. So there's a few questions coming in, so I'll just read them out, and if one of the guys in the panel want to come in and take it. So there's a question about a lot of movement in the talent marketplace, skilled people leaving to move to new employers, as these people have felt disconnected from their employers and managers who didn't pay them enough attention. This has seen a lot of urgent counter offers by employers, which can be too little too late. So are there any specific proactive interventions that you've put in place as employers or managers to keep retention of staff and to, I suppose, reiterate that there are career and growth opportunities in a virtual, potentially virtual world? Who is black? Catherine, you're unmuted. Can I ask you that?
Oh yeah. So definitely, yeah, we've seen movement of staff now, but I feel, you know, staff and people have stayed still for almost 2 years, and it is going to be natural that people want to move around, people want to travel, people want to go back to education. So I think, you know, the world is our oyster now again as we kind of get back into some form of normality. I think with Northern Trust, you know, we are delighted to see, you know, that we're able to have a lot of staff move with us internally as well, be it in Limerick or be it to one of our other offices. So that's a big help for us as well. But I do think it is part of the pandemic. I think all businesses are seeing it, manufacturing, you know, financial, whatever it is, that we're seeing it across the board. And it is going back, you know, to your communications with your team, with your individuals, seeing what works for them. As we're coming into a future of work now, you know, this is a new model. What works for you? Let's see, does it work for us both together? How can we make it work together? It's having those conversations up front, Carl. I do think naturally some people will want to move, and, you know, and I do think some people need to move just to see whatever the other side, and that's fine. And that should work out perfectly for them. I always say keep in touch with your people as they move as well around the world.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. That's great. There's another question about recruitment. How will recruitment look in the future if the office location is not an issue? So I suppose what they're asking there is, you know, you'd normally go for a job where you're living and you go to the office. So is that all going to change? Does that kind of open up the whole recruitment market to organizations like yourself now that locations aren't necessarily a blockage or a hindrance? Can I ask Sinead that question? Would you mind, Sinead?
Yeah, of course. I think that it definitely has removed some constraints or barriers that were there in terms of people having to maybe be in a city to take a job with an organisation. So we saw during the pandemic a lot of people move out of Dublin and maybe back home or closer to some of their family and friends. And I think that some of those people will not want to come back. And it might be possible for them to organise their work so that they can come in 1 or 2 days and still have that time in the office. But I do definitely think in terms of the talent pool, this will give organisations more options. And in terms of the employees themselves, it gives employees more options where they choose to live and locate themselves and their families as well. So I think that definitely is a silver lining coming out of some of the COVID challenges.
Thanks, Sinead. Yeah, thanks for that. There's 2 questions here, and I suppose we leave it at this. I'm going to bring Conor in if he doesn't mind. There's 2 that kind of roll into one here. Do you believe corporate creativity is impacted by the greater use of platforms such as Teams, Zoom, etc.? And then how might team leaders stay connected with individual team members working in different ways to maintain this environment of belonging and empowerment? Now, I know you probably have touched on that, but would you address that again for me, Conor?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, simple answer to the first part before I expand is yes. I think it has impacted on creativity, and I know I see that from, you know, elements of our business like our digital team and our brand campaign team, who's, you know, day to day is coming up with creative campaigns for clients, creative ways to raise awareness and creative ways to help them, you know, build and enhance their reputation and achieve their business goals. But at the same time, look, nature finds a way. You know, creative people are creative people. They find creative ways around problems, and it's amazing how people can adjust to what's thrown at them. And, you know, it's more difficult to be creative. Yes, I suppose is the simple answer, but creative people find a way to be creative. That doesn't sound like a horrible tautology. And I'm also amazed at the level of good ideas that are coming up and how people are looking to use the opportunity in this to come up with different ways of doing things, come up with different ways of communicating messages, come up with different ways of using social platforms and virtual platforms for clients to accomplish the same things that they used to do in a more analog face-to-face environment when that was more possible. And the second part about belonging, you know, one of the things that I see as being a real challenge is, you know, as we move to embracing more of a flexible and hybrid working model, if I have, you know, 2 direct reports, if I have Grania and Siobhan, and Grania because it suits her more, can spend a lot more time in the office, and Siobhan, because it suits her more, works a lot more remotely. If both of their output is equally fantastic and they're both equally good colleagues, and the two of them are looking to advance, and one position comes up, I think we're going to come up with a lot of kind of challenges around, well, how are we valuing what people are doing when we're not seeing them all the time? And are people at a bit of a disadvantage if they're not getting that face-to-face contact? How are we recreating that? How are we making sure that people aren't disadvantaged unfairly simply because what we value from them and how we're organising their work-life balance and how they're organising their work-life balance simply means that they're not getting the same time in the office and face-to-face time that does help build their own internal brand, if you like.
Okay, super. Thanks, Conor. Okay, folks, we'll wrap it up with that. It's been a fantastic discussion. Really, really grateful for giving your time. So Sinead, Catherine and Conor, on behalf of us all at Humanli, thanks a million. Thanks to IMS for hosting the event on Zoom and doing a great job, because I've been pretty nervous doing all this myself and pushing all the wrong buttons. Look, it's an exciting time ahead. I suppose what's come out of all of this is that we as humans, we are resilient. There's no doubt about that. There's huge resilience in people. There's huge adaptivity in people. No matter what's thrown at us, we can deal with it. We've learned from it. There's lots of good stuff that's going to come from this pandemic. So look, at lots more discussion, I'm sure. And as I think it was Catherine mentioned a few times, we're going to do things wrong. People are going to do things wrong. We're still learning. But I think your contributions this morning have been very informative. I hope everybody listening has enjoyed the webinar, and many thanks for your questions. We will be sending a questionnaire out to everybody that joined the webinar with things like just what we can do in the future from a human perspective, what other topics you'd like to see, get some feedback on how you thought the webinar presented itself. And there's a short survey there as well that we might ask you to complete before you pop off, because again, we just want to learn from this. We don't want people sitting on the other end of a screen bored to tears. So I think this morning was definitely a very interesting topic. So we want you to suggest what the next one should be. So look, we leave it at that, folks. Thanks a million for your time again, to all the panelists, everyone that took time to come and listen to us. Thank you from Humanli. It's over and out.
Thank you, Karen.